Speaking of mistakes, Gonky, you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah. Since when you told me you were having Wombat on, I was like, man, let me get some cool E2 stuff. And actually, some of the emails I've gotten, people are asking about, hey, you should have Wombat talk about the E2 wire snap. And it happened 8, 9. It's been a while, but it's a really cool video. I mean, we'll play it and then talk about it.
Look at that pass. It's beautiful. What a beautiful.
Look at that. So the wire snaps, boom.
Whoa, Nelly.
See you later. Right. The 60 feet off the water is the deck.
Look at all the hands. You see all the people? They're like,
because that's running. Common knowledge. That's what they do is they look for
Three
survivors.
Pilots assigned to the screw tops of Airborne Early Warning Squadron 1
screw top.
Yeah, so
awarded the Armed Forces Airmen.
I mean, I know Wombat this happened after you transitioned the Hornet, but do you like how fast were those guys going when they went off the end?
It was rumored to be like between 60 and 80 knots.
60 and 80 knots. And what do you normally take off in the E2?
Same as a Hornet. Same as a Super Hornet. It's really 130, 140 knots. Yeah.
So I mean, like, because when I watched that, it looked like the airplane slowed down a lot. Significantly. Cable brakes. And how much horsepower are we talking about here?
5,100 shaft horsepower each side.
5,100 side. So I mean, that in my mind, I'm like, dude, how much power? I mean, I know turboprops work much better at low and slow.
It's very, very over. It's considered to be very overpowered down low for what it does.
Wow. I would suspect that ground effect probably helped those guys out.
Yeah.
But I mean, I
they
don't.
were living in ground effect.
The thing that blows me away is being a carrier guy. I always felt confident in my airplane, and you can relate to, right? When you transition to Hornet, it was nice to have the seat. Right. And and that's one of the things I always admired about E2 guys and gals was they're doing this with no real escape capability. And, you always think, well, it's an E2, it's slower, it's safer. But dude, like this is a great case where literally everybody in that, and I would venture to say would the NFOs even know what's going
on? Probably not initially. You know what I mean? They'd feel the deceleration and then feel it give way, and that would be their probably their first indication. But I would be shocked if there was any communication between the front and back at that point. Typically, most of the communication was done by the time we pushed out a Marshall or pushed out the overhead stack. They kind of just wouldn't talk much for good reason because we were kind of busy. And but they would have felt the normal deceleration is what I've been told by people close to it. And then it just felt like they just gave way. And they knew immediately the wire had snapped. They pushed the power up. Because in an E2, you don't go to full power when you touch down like a Hornet. Well, because you have P factor.
So what do you, I mean, is there an arbitrary power setting you go to, or
you hold what you got? You just hold what you got. Because think about it, if you have all that P factor that you jam in, right? You could spit a wire. Now you have controllability. I mean, remember, it's a whole different type of flying. You're talking about a plane, and I know I've talked about it before, but you're talking about a plane that has two giant non-reciprocating engines, so they go in the same direction.
Right.
4 tails, but only 3 rudders. Right. I mean, it is a bizarre aircraft.
Why did they do that? Why didn't they kind of rotate?
Because the space on the ship, they would have to have 2 engines for each plane to replace. They'd have to have gearboxes and all that. Whereas if you have the same, because space is limited for parts, you could just have 1 spare motor, 1 spare gearbox.
Okay.
So yeah, the P factor is insane in that airplane. So that's why you hold what you got. And again, you live on the fact that, like, the reason you and I and the Hornet went to max or mil power, on touchdown is because of engine spool up time. Yeah. You don't have that same issue, right? But I mean, a lot of people look at the E2 because of its size and they're like, oh, it's slow, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's because of its size. Right. Like, look at a C5 that takes off. That thing looks like it's not even moving. Well, it is, obviously. It's because of how big it is. It doesn't look like it is. So, like, a lot of people are like, oh, was it weird going from the approach speed of a Hawkeye to the approach speed of a Hornet? And it's like, well, it wasn't that much different. I mean, if you watch Platcam video, the approach speed of a Hawkeye and the approach speed of a Super Hornet are identical. I mean, they are. So, but it's that between the P factor and all that, it was pretty crazy.
Did you guys have a settle off the? Do you guys have a settle procedure? Set off the cat?
Yeah, we would essentially. You would set the power. I mean, the power is already up on takeoff. Because you're at max power for takeoff, right? So you would ensure that you are at max power, and then you'd set an AOA, and if you hit the water, you would get out. If you were settling off the cat, the co-pilot would typically reach up and open one of the ditching hatches. So that way, if the fuselage bent, at least you'd have one way out. The NFOs in the back have a ditching hatch as well, but they take it out before the cat shot, and they stow it after the catapult shot, and then they take it out before landing. So it's completely stowed.
So these guys trap with pretty much a neutral power setting. Cable breaks, they go off the end. So if they firewall it, I mean, does the airplane try to roll?
No, it would be a yaw, and they did firewall it, and it did fine. Because remember, now you're also talking about qualified fleet E2 pilots that are used to that P factor, right? So
they just put in a boot of rudder.
Which pedal?
The right pedal.
Right.
I don't know.
Right pedal?
You have to fly it. But
left turning tendency, right.
Well, I don't know. It depends on which way the props.
The nose, when you accelerate, the nose goes to the right.
Oh, it does? Okay, then
goes to the right. See, it's left pedal, like a helicopter. Yeah, it's left pedal.
So, but yeah, there was salt spray on the bottom of their aircraft. There was salt on the tail hook. They got very, 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 very close to the water.
That's amazing. It's amazing. But like I said, I mean, I can't imagine flying around. I mean, the boat's dangerous, and I can't imagine not having the ejection seat. The ejection seat won't save you every time, but it's nice to know that you have.
You flew a T-38 Gonky. That wouldn't have saved you in a lot of places.
Right, but not around the
ship.
That's different. That's different.
Well, and I mean, that's when you think about it, right? It's the biggest aircraft with the most moving parts, with no ejection seats, and at the time, didn't even have an audible rat out warning.
Hey, was that an 8-blade?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. They were all 8 blades by then.
Yeah.
That really didn't make much of a difference as far as the thrust at all between the 8 and the 4 blade. To be honest with you, it was very, very minimal.
Do you know why the cable broke?
I think it tube blocked, actually. I think they either had the wrong setting or it had too many traps on it, and it parted when it hit the end.
Wow.
Yeah. So those guys did fantastic. The tragedy of that story is that they got air medals and nothing higher, because it should have been higher. Like that's really DFC.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they got air medals. That's like DFC level flying. In my opinion.
That would be a tragedy if all they got was a.
I'm pretty sure that's what.
Yeah. Well, speaking of medals,
thanks, man. Like I said, it's one of my favorite E2 videos because it's so hairy.